first just look into the camera and say your name and I guess whatever title you would like to call yourself. So actor, teacher, all of that. So look into the camera and say, my name is Luis Barroso.
Hey, I'm Luis Q. Barroso, and I'm a theater artist.
That's great, perfect. Okay, so, and is it Luis? Or Louis Q?
I'm in America, so I was born Luis Quintin Barroso Hernandez Rivera Hernandez. But then when I came to the United States, I'm just Luis Quentin Barroso, or Luis. My professional name is Luis Q. Barroso. Some people call me Luis. Yeah. Some people call me Louis. Some people call me Louis. Some people call me Lou. Some people call me LQ. Louis Q. Yeah. So whatever falls trippingly off of your tongue.
Okay, got it. Well, Louis Q. I like that.
Louis Q.
So tell us a little bit how you first got started in the theater.
Theater, okay. Well, I was born in Havana, Cuba, and I came to the United States at the age of 10. Because I was 10, I was put into the 5th grade, right? For my age, I didn't speak a word of English. And I was placed in Miss Bass's 5th grade class at Buena Vista Elementary in Miami, Florida. And it was Miss Bass's 5th grade class year to do the yearly play. And poor Miss Bass, what am I going to do with this Hispanic kid who doesn't speak a word of English? Because she had to use the whole class. So I became a mourner at Tom Sawyer's funeral. You know, in the story of Tom Sawyer, they think Tom and Huck are deceased. They've been in an accident, and they hold a memorial. And she thought I was so good that she placed me center, and right there, I was on stage, and the audience was right there, and I was a mourner. I was mourning. That's how it all started. Then from then on, I was in talent shows. I went through high school in plays and learned how to dance, and I sang. And actually, I sang as a little kid. My parents said that when I was a child, I was always singing and dancing because my parents did. So they were very happy people. Although we were very poor in Cuba, we still had a joy about us. My family was already very joyful. And so I've always been kind of performing. So it came naturally, and then after that it just took off. In high school I was a president of the Thespian Society, and we did plays, we put on plays, and I had a friend, Donna, who taught me actual choreography and dance, because up to that point I'd just been doing what I call free dancing, and you know, not choreographed. So I learned to actually learn steps in a sequence, which is what choreography is. Then I went to college, and I graduated from Rollins College, and I had a double major, English and theater. And I had a great time at doing theater at the Annie Russell Theater at Rollins College. Did every show because that was my focus. The English part was really to get a teaching degree, because in Florida they didn't certify theater teachers or teachers to teach theater. So I wanted to get a degree so I could have something to fall back on. Because I mean, I came from a very poor family. Just the mere fact that I was doing theater, then they loved it. I mean, my parents were very supportive all my life. They enjoyed coming to see me in plays, but I felt that I needed to have and I also took education courses, although by the time I was a senior, I already had a scholarship to Tulane University, so I didn't do the final student teaching, which would have given me my certificate, but I had every course in education that I needed to get the education certificate. And then I got a scholarship to Tulane to come and in my junior year in college, I discovered I had been acting and doing musical theater and acting and all that. But my junior year, my professors discovered that I had a talent for directing. I took a directing course. I directed a one-act play, and I don't know, they just thought that I had a good eye for staging, for getting my actors, to helping them with their characters and stuff. So, and I did too. I enjoyed the directing and putting stuff together, putting something together, being here and my actors and being part of talking with the designers about the scenery, because the director has to do all of that. It isn't just staging a show. You have to make sure that everything else goes with your production idea. So I enjoyed it, and I got a scholarship to Tulane. I also was on scholarship at Rollins. Believe you me, my parents couldn't afford a fancy college like Rollins, but when I graduated from Miami-Jackson High School, I got a scholarship to Rollins. And then I got a scholarship to Tulane, came to New Orleans, and that's what brought me to New Orleans in 1966. And from then on, my career, I continued with directing. Then after I finished at Tulane, I had just finished, and Donald Meyer from Gallery Circle Theater came to me at a cast party and said, "Louis, we're losing our children's theater director. Would you like to do it?" I said, "Oh my God, I'm just getting out of school and I'm getting a job in theater. Of course I'll do it." So I started at Gallery Circle Theater in 1968 when I finished at Tulane. And I was there a couple of years. And in 1970, Le Petit Théâtre de Vieux-Carré, they had this theater that they had just recently built, which is, I eventually called the Children's Corner, and they brought me over to direct children's theater there. Now during all this time also I was doing talks in school, I was touring the schools with shows. In other words, my life during that time was all involved in bringing theater to children. And people ask me, well, you were trained to be a director, thinking that I would be a director for adult theater. But there's no difference. Directing is directing, and the only difference was the material. I was doing fairy tales and fanciful tales, and actually, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So picking up at, you were working with the Vieux-Carré.
Le Petit Théâtre, right. So anyhow, are you ready?
I am.
Yeah. So anyhow, the Children's Corner really took off. I was very fortunate that I was able to surround myself with a very creative group of people. I was not happy with the published scripts for children's theater, so I had local writers, local composers. All the shows were like little mini musicals, and it just took off. And we worked diligently and very hard because we had to come up with 4 shows a year, and that's not easy to do, come up with 4 original shows a year. But we did it. I did have different writers. I didn't have one writer, or composer writing, every show, but I had to be part of each of the shows. And but I was very fortunate. There were some brilliant people at that time. I worked with Sharon O'Brien, and she and Fred Palmisano wrote shows. Lila Hay Owen and Jim O'Quinn wrote shows. And like I said, the Children's Corner just took off. Within a year, we were selling out every performance. We did 16 shows for performances of each show, and they were selling out. And it just, it became something that people look forward to, because what it actually was a family theater. I wanted to entertain the whole family. I knew that the parents had to bring the kids, right? So they would be there. So we tried to, entertain the parents too. We didn't talk to you, but
So it's recording there without the light, but the
It's
listening.
probably,
Okay.
maybe it was just, okay.
So what?
Right.
Okay, so it's recording right now.
Okay, so talk about that part again of your students.
which one? Oh,
The students, how great it is to see and
the people that worked with me back then. Okay.
names.
All right. So, another great joy out of that period is the fact that a lot of the young people that worked with me at that time are still around doing theater or theater-related things. Ricky Graham he did a lot of writing for me. He was in several shows for me, and now he's, you know, a big star here in town.
It's recording.
Okay. So Golden Age of Theater, all your students.
Oh, we back to that?
Yeah.
All right. So anyhow, one of the joys that came out of that period is that some of the young people that I worked with during that period are still working today, and they're doing theater. People like Ricky Graham, he did writing for me, and he appeared in several shows with me or for me. And Peggy Ann Scott Laborde, well, Peggy Ann Scott, she's Peggy Scott. So she's, yeah, Peggy Laborde, Peggy Scott Laborde, whatever. And Edward R. Cox, John Grimsley of the Dog and Pony Theater Company, and Heidi Junius is still directing and choreographing here in town. Cecile Covert and her mother, Fanny Casey, was my costumer, and Cecile helped her, and Cecile was in several of the shows, and she's a very much in demand costumer here in town right now. So there were a lot of the young people that worked with me at that time were enthused enough to continue in the business and hopefully learned from that experience, you know, and they're doing it now. And that.
What was the nickname that you had for Peggy Scott Laborde?
Beg pardon?
What was her nickname? The princess of...
Oh, she was my princess, and one of my princesses in residence. I had a couple of three, you know, beautiful blonde girls, Lisa Wolf and Peggy Ann Scott, and I can't remember the other girl's name, but they did several shows for me. Peggy was in the Red Shoes. She was the princess in Rumpelstiltskin. In fact, I have a picture of her, and then I don't know if you might want to use it and show it, of her and me. And but anyhow, that's one of the joys. Another one of the joys from that period. And I think that's why that period, the Children's Corner, the golden years of children's theater, has stayed around, is because there's still people around that you know, remember it. I have a couple of people that have stopped that I know that said, "Oh, I remember coming to see your shows." You know, they're like 35, 40 years old now, but they were little then, and I remember coming to see your shows, and you know, that's a great joy, and that they remember.
We were talking before, but not on camera, about how great it was. You know, so many people came together and were collaborating and working together.
Yes.
And it felt like it wasn't work, even though it was. So maybe can you talk about that?
To tell you the truth, as I look back on my over 40 years career, I've never worked a day in my life. I've never worked a day in my life. I mean, I've worked, but I really haven't. How can you call work to something that you enjoy doing? And like I said, we were creating this iconic thing without really realizing it. And we were doing, so I guess, all the right things. We were doing the shows, we were touring, I was going to schools and doing talks and doing workshops. So I mean, it's something that I don't think that while you're doing something that's going to become iconic or important, that you really think at the time that you're doing it that it's going to happen. Or if you do, then you shouldn't be doing it. You should be doing it just because you're enjoying it and because you know that it's bringing joy to people and helping people, and you shouldn't think about, oh, someday this is going to be iconic, and someday these kids are going to grow up or become, you know, real good at what they're doing, you know, like all the people that, I mean, I'm so proud of Peggy because, I mean, the stuff she's doing at WYES is just phenomenal. And I hope she someday does something about the Children's Corner years. I'm working on it. But, you know, and Beth Utterbach, her brother, who runs the production manager at WYES, her brother Sidney and her sister Maria did tons of shows with me. And Sidney is now a political advisor here in town, you know, so that's still kind of theatrical. But then that was from 70 through 78 was the years that the Children's Corner. In 78, I don't know. I sort of felt we were starting to repeat ourselves, and the group has started to find other interests and dissipate. So it was time to go. So no sooner I went than my friend Bill Holliday, he was a comedian here in town, Billy Holliday.
That was so great was when you were talking about your first experience in the theater of, you couldn't speak, you couldn't speak English, but you were able to really communicate and shine through theater. So maybe that, like...
I'm sorry, you have to talk louder.
That's okay. When you're, when you first did your first play...
Yeah, that was a mourner at Tom Sawyer's and Huck Finn's funeral.
Exactly, but you didn't know the language.
No, all I had to do was look sad, and my mother gave me a hanky so I could dab my eyes.
Exactly. So
She was my first accessorizer.
Okay. It isn't, I mean, we don't have
Okay.
to talk about it, but...
So you want to go back to that now?
No, that's... whatever's fine.
Or can we can talk about it, and you can
Yeah.
you can
We'll edit it, yeah.
edit it in there.
Yeah, and I'm recording now.
Okay.
All right. So anyhow, that first experience of me being a mourner, and it was very interesting because I was telling you earlier how supportive my parents were of my doing this, and Miss Bass, all she asked me to do was, or asked my parents, was to wear black pants and a white shirt. So I got dressed for the performance. My father looks at me and says, "You don't look like a mourner." He goes through his drawer and he gets me a little bow tie, and he puts a little bow tie on me. So my father was my first costumer. Then my mother brings me a hanky, and I said, "Mother, I don't need a hanky." She says, "Yes, you do, because at funerals sometimes your eyes get moist and you might need it." So she was my first accessorizer. And sure enough, in the middle of the performance, I took out the hanky, and then the little girl in front of me started, so I handed her my hanky. So that's part of the acting process. Without having to say a word, I communicated the sadness of the situation, and I didn't have to speak a word because I couldn't. In fact, also what the young man playing the preacher in the scene was quite good for that the performance, and he really brought it. He was, and I said, "Oh my God, yes, this is serious stuff." So and from then on, I was hooked. I was hooked on theater. I loved being on that stage. I loved having an audience out there watching. And Louis Q. Barroso, the entertainer, was born. I am an entertainer. I am a performer. Somebody says, "Oh, I'm going to go do, we're doing this drama, Julius Caesar. I want you to play Caesar." "Oh, a drama? Sure, I can do drama." "Oh, we're going to do this comedy, El Grande de Coca-Cola." "Oh, yeah, I can do comedy." "Oh, we're going to do Mame. Can you sing?" "Of course I can sing." If you're a performer, you do all those things. You just don't just act or sing or dance. And in terms of acting, I'm a performer. In terms of directing, I'm a visualizer. I can come up with ideas. In fact, after the Children's Corner, I left town. I went to Atlanta. And I spent 9 years in Atlanta working at the Center for Puppetry Arts. I was the artistic director of the children's series there. And my work continued there. I still asked Freddie and Ricky to write shows for me, so I still had a great connection. I never lost my connection to New Orleans and to my people that I had worked with here. And in Atlanta, I conceptualized shows, so puppetry is very different. And I was glad to do that because I was learning a new skill. Now, I had already done some shows here in town with Nancy Staub in the Puppet Playhouse, because during my whole time of working here in the Children's Corner or Gallery and all that, I still did shows with other people and learned from other people, and because you're constantly learning, you can't stop learning. I'm still learning. I'm learning about videos, hello, and how difficult it can be. Anyhow, forgive me, but yeah, I spent 9 years doing puppet shows, and the joy of that too is working in a new medium, because when I think about it, I've worked in almost every medium of entertainment. I've done cabaret, I've done theater. The only thing I haven't done, and let me tell you very seriously, is a stint in the circus. But that may come. I'm still working on that. I'm going to go to the Ringling Circus College in Oslo, Florida, and I don't know, juggle or something. Become a clown. That's what I would probably become, is a clown. But yeah, I've worked in every medium of entertainment you can be. I've done solo work, recitals, cabaret, theater, directing, but directing is my passion above all. I was trained as a director. It was discovered, as I said earlier, at Rollins College, and I loved it. I loved directing. I loved putting things together. I loved working with actors and that kind of thing. So, and you have to have a passion, and I have a passion for acting too, but my main passion is directing for the theater. Then luckily my passion became entertaining kids and families, and it's, you know, and the rest of it now is history.
So great. What's been your favorite? Did you have a favorite play or something that you directed?
Well, favorite play, well, the children's shows were all wonderful. I had a great time with Sleeping Beauty. I mean, you know, it was a hoot. I decided that I wanted my Sleeping Beauty to be a brunette, and beautiful brunette young lady that played the role. But then all the fairies all had different color hair, so I said, that's not going to work. So I put them all in blonde wigs. Big blonde wigs, and they were all blondes. All the fairies were blondes, and she was a brunette. So that was fun to conceptualize that whole thing of trying to make, you know, have the princess stand out from, and have the fairies, you know, they had individual personalities, and I worked with each of them on their personalities. But as far as the look, they all had kind of a similar look. So that was a lot of fun, that show. And then as an actor, I had a lot of fun playing Hysterium, and a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. In fact, I did that with Sidney Arroyo. He played Pseudolus, and I played Hysterium. And we did that, believe it or not, it was a theater that opened on Bourbon Street, of all places. It was at the Royal Sonesta on the corner of the Royal Sonesta. For a while there was a theater there, and we did the show there. Like I said, during that time I was doing theater coming out of the wazoo. I was doing my own children's theater, but then friends were doing shows elsewhere, and they, Louis, come and do this. Okay, I'll be there. The People Playhouse, my friend Lila, who had written shows for me in the but the applause?
Yes, well, once you've performed, you've done a good show, or your actors have done, you know, what is that like? What does that feel like as an actor to be on stage and have the applause?
Okay. You asked an interesting question about how does one feel after a show's over at the end of the show when you're taking your curtain call, right? Well, let me tell you, as an actor, I have a very interesting thing that I do that I feel I've seen other actors do it. I like to see my audience applauding, so I don't go like this. I go like this, so I can see them. So I can see the smile on their faces. Because, I mean, there's a famous song called, from a musical called Applause. Then it goes, what is it that we're living for? Applause, applause. Nothing I know brings on the applause like big applause. So anyhow, yeah, you kind of live for that. I mean, you've been working for 2-3 hours on a stage, and you want an audience who hopefully have been entertained, and you want that adulation, if you want to call it that, or that feeling that they have taken you in, and that you have been able to take them. We're communicators,
Okay.
right? And then after the Atlanta stint, I came back to New Orleans, my hometown.
Camera is recording, so I mean it shows full power, which is
All right. All right. So we're down to when I came back. All right. So I came back to New Orleans, and at the end of 1989, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I wanted to come back and be in my hometown. Then I did a show with Wanda Ruzan, my friend Wanda Ruzan. She was teaching. She was one of the first teachers of theater in this program. It had just been started, the Gifted and Talented program in the Orleans Parish Schools. Actually, it's a whole statewide thing, because my certification, I can go anywhere, Baton Rouge or anywhere, and teach theater. And she told me about the program, and I went and applied and was hired, and I was part-time the first semester, and then they hired me full-time. And I did all that till 2005. I would go to the school, I would take my kids out of class, I would teach in a little drama class, and then they would go back to class, and it was great. During that time too, I started to reinvent myself more as an actor. I didn't do that much children's theater. I did act in a few children's shows because my friends were still directing. Lila who directed a children's show, The Phantom of the French Opera. She said the Phantom story here in New Orleans. And actually, I have the press. I want to say I am very grateful for the press here in New Orleans. Back in the 70s, anytime that I've done something, the press has been tremendous. And of course, back in those days, we had, you know, the Times-Picayune, the States Item, they both reviewed. We had Figaro, we had the Vieux Courrier, we had a lot of press. And I'm very grateful because they really dug the children's shows. And when I came back to Le Petit to do a children's show for the Phantom, the press called me the Phantom Barroso. I was haunting the children's corner. I was haunting, and let me tell you, if they turn my children's corner into a kitchen, I'm going to haunt it when I die. But yeah, like I said, and this article was great because it also showed all me and some of my different incantations. Because, like I said, I worked with a lot of theater groups. This is me as Shakespeare. I did Shakespeare for a fundraiser for Dog and Pony when we were doing Shakespeare in the Park. And this is me as the witch in Hansel and Gretel. I worked with Nord Opera with David Morlock, and he cast me as a witch. The witch in the opera Hansel and Gretel is played by a man. It's a high tenor role. And there I was in my witch drag. And as an actor, you know, I don't mind doing whatever the role calls for. I was a detective, a Hispanic with my maracas, a clown. Again, I'm getting tired just talking to you of my 40 years of theater and all the stuff I've done. But I wasn't tired when we first started because but it's a life in the theater, and I'm fortunate. I have never done anything but theater, and whether it's acting, directing, designing, education, theater has been my life. I have had a life in the theater, and I'm very grateful and very fortunate. I've worked at it, but like I said earlier, it hasn't seemed like work because you're doing it and you're entertaining, you're communicating, you're making people happy. Even if you're doing a drama, you know, you're making people cry, you're making people feel. And there's very few professions where you can do all of that. And I've been doing it for over 40 years. So then I started teaching, and I've taught 15 years for Orleans Parish until Katrina came, which Katrina destroyed a lot of things. Luckily, I didn't let it destroy me, but it did destroy me. Because I lost my job. They fired all the teachers. I still continued doing theater, but here in town, unless you have a position in a theater or something like that, you don't make a living in theater. There are very few people here in town who are actually making a living in theater like I have done. So I decided to retire from teaching, and then that didn't last long because I enjoyed it so much, and now I'm teaching part-time. Whoops. I'm teaching part-time now, and I've gone back to it. Huh?
What's it like to go back into the schools now?
You know, you'd think there'd be a lot of difference, but there really isn't. Kids are kids. And you know, no matter whether it's back in the 70s or the 80s or 90s or the 2000s, they're kids. You have to. One thing that I really get out of teaching kids and being around kids is that I learn a lot, because I'm not keeping up with, you know, a lot of things that are happening. And one of the things that the kids that I always talk with the kids about what they're watching on TV, what music they're listening to. They bring in their music and tell me, and I bring in my show tunes and teach them about, you know, singers that they may not know about, and shows that they may not know about. So it's kind of a back and forth in terms of that, and I enjoy that. One of my kids recently told me that they watched something called Sweet Life on Deck on the Disney Channel. I said, let me watch that. And I went and watched it, and it's really a nice show. It shows some young people hard at work. They work on a boat, on a ship, and it was great. You know, I'm glad that the kid was watching that, and he taught me something. So it's a joy. And the same thing when back in the summer when I was doing shows for kids, you know, I would watch the kids and I would try and see what it was that was entertaining them, and I'd learn from them what was happening. And let me tell you, when you're a kid, you're a kid. It doesn't matter what era you're in, you still have. Now, granted, today they're a little bit more savvy because of all the technology and all that, but they're still kids. I was a kid, and I hope I never forget that I'm a kid, that I was a kid. And that's what keeps me going, is the fact that, and I don't have the Peter Pan complex, I won't grow up thing, because I have grown up. Let me tell you, my bones feel it. But so I can't say I won't grow up. I don't want to go to school. But kids keep you young, and you know, I do have a few wrinkles, but they keep me young, and that was one of the great joys of working for and with the kids, and they deserve it. They deserve the best theater possible, because they're going to become the audiences of tomorrow, and if they're not entertained as a kid, they may not. They may say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to the theater. And you want the adults to go to the theater. We need audiences. Here in New Orleans particularly, there's so much theater going on now. And not everybody, I mean, I went to see a show the other night and there were only like 10 of us in the audience. So not everybody's getting the audiences. So I wish them all luck. I'm sort of semi-retired. If a friend or somebody is doing a show and they call me, or Summer Lyric, I've done a lot of work with Chilling Summer Lyric. I adore the people there, Michael Howard, Charlie Hayes, my friend Charlie Hayes, who is a general manager. And they treat you great. They have people that do your makeup and people do your costumes, and they really do theater right. And my friend John Grimsley is now working at Ache, and I did a show for Ache Cultural Arts Center recently, a show about illiteracy, and we did it for young people too, so that was kind of fun, about the importance of learning to read. And so I'm still doing my thing, you know, not as much as I used to, but I'm trying to stay in there as much as I can. And that is a life in the theater.
And that's a wrap.